everyone. I hope you're doing well and taking time out for yourself to do the things that bring you comfort and joy. I don't want to make any assumptions, but I think for most of us here, that's been seeking solace and wisdom in the written word. I know lately I've been feeling world weary, and the books that have, books have always given me solace, and lately these days, to assuage my world weariness, that's been reading illustrated books. So one of the things that I look forward to is FaceTiming with my young nieces. Most of them, except for the youngest one, all know how to read on their own. I'm so proud of them. And so what we've been doing lately when we FaceTime, we'll do our own version of Reading Rainbow, and we'll read whatever speaks to us in that moment, or we'll share books from the library and read to one another. So in this video, which I'm hoping will be a new series on this channel, is talking about the children's literature I've been reading with them and enjoying. And I know that kind of writing isn't for everyone, so I'm also going to recommend nonfiction books that I've enjoyed that explore similar topics. So the first ones are perfect for this time of year. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, they're all set in the winter. So an illustrated book that we really loved, me most especially, is Emily by Michael Bedard, illustrated by Barbara Cooney. She's one of my all-time favorite children's books illustrators, but she also wrote a couple of her own children's books. And this one, Michael Bedard tells the story of a little girl who happens to be a neighbor of Emily Dickinson. And he tells the story, it opens with her waiting for the coming spring. Her father's just ordered lily bulbs, and she has them in a row on her windowsill. And so Emily is a great source of curiosity in this little girl and among other children in the neighborhood. And one day her mom receives an invitation to come over to Emily's home and play the piano. It's just about what happens when she goes to the home. It's about the little leaps of faith, such as extending an open hand to a stranger or a neighbor. I thought this was such a beautiful story, and Bedard's afterword on how the story found him, just that whole topic of how stories come into our lives just fascinates me. And yeah, I highly recommend that book. And Barbara Cooney's watercolor illustrations throughout the book, it just made the whole reading experience even more magical. And the nonfiction book, for those of you who would like more information about Emily Dickinson, is this one, Emily Dickinson's Gardening Life by Marta McDowell, The Plants and Places That Inspired the Iconic Poet. Now this is perhaps one of the most beautiful and interesting takes on Emily Dickinson's life. It is filled with her poetry, gorgeous paintings. It takes you through each season. Emily was an avid gardener, and it's all about the flowers that she tended and grew, picked for loved ones, and dried in her herbarium. There's black and white photographs of her family's home in Massachusetts. And yeah, gorgeous botanical illustrations as well. And in the back, which I love, is more contemporary photographs of what her garden looks like now. Oh yeah, here's one of my most favorite flowers, Aqualesia. That's a native one for the East Coast. Here's a gorgeous photograph of the Dickinson homestead in the winter. And yeah, and what I loved the most is that there's a whole list of all the annuals and perennials that Emily grew and cultivated there. So if you feel inspired to plant a flower in her honor or in any loved one's honor, you can do so. Visiting Emily's garden is definitely a bucket list event for me. Then we read Over and Under the Snow by Kate Messner, illustrated by Christopher Silas Neal. So this is a story about a little girl and her father who go on a little skiing excursion in the forest around their home, and he's pointing out to her all the hidden life that's going on underneath them, called the Subnivian Zone. And this was such a great educational opportunity with my nieces, because it introduced a bunch of terms that they never heard of, such as torpor and the Subnivian Zone. And what we really loved is that in the back it goes into more detail of the various animals and how they survive in the extreme cold. Another one, it was Counting Winter by Nancy White Carlstrom, illustrated by Claudia McGehee. And it's a numerical exploration of the animal world. And I really like McGehee's like very striking, almost woodblock illustrations. Oh, so sweet. But yeah, this one too. So fun. Has more animals, so it was really nice to read these back to back, because there's different animals that weren't mentioned in the Messner book. So love this. And a nonfiction book to accompany these is Winter World by Bernd, Heinrich, The Ingenuity of Animal Survival. This is one of my favorite nature books. He's an ecological biologist in Vermont. And I love his books because he includes his pencil drawings. This is like a diary of his observations that he makes throughout the winter season of all the creatures in the woods in his home/living laboratory. So he talks about the evolution, the survival strategies, the adaptability of various birds, amphibians, mammals, which just, their endurance is a miracle. Yeah, this one's another one I really recommend. And then another children's book we read is My Momo-La is a Museum by Mamta, Nainy, and illustrated by Violet Kim. This is just such a sweet story. It's about a little girl who has a very special bond with her grandmother who grew up in Tibet. And Momo-La has a suitcase of all these precious items from her life in Tibet. And she tells the story of how she and her family had to flee, about the memories we carry in our hearts and the stories behind the irreplaceable treasures that we bring and carry from our past that may appear meaningless to others, but are in fact irreplaceable. And it just reminds us just to have gratitude for the people who are like the center of that familial history. Yeah, I really love this because it just reminds us of our shared humanity. Like, everyone has a familial history. Everyone has, you know, that special person that helped make you who you are. And, oh, I just love this story so much. And then one nonfiction this is more historical fiction, is this Life Along the Silk Road by Susan Whitfield. Whitfield, I believe, is a scholar and professor who specializes in the archaeology and history of the Silk Road. She uses the historical record, contemporary sources, and she looks into 12 characters. So there's various, there's monks, there's a monk, there's a Persian writer, there's an African shipmaster, there's a merchant, of course, and a nun. They all traveled via this network of routes called the Silk Road, but there's also letters and various artifacts. It was fascinating. So I would love to hear what you've been reading and what your recommendations would be for any of these children's books. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time. Take good care. Bye-bye.